Hero Podcast. Igniting both the art and the science of functional medicine. Here's your host, Dr. Brad Watts.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the program today. This is Dr. Brad Watts with the Nutrition Hero Podcast. Thank you for tuning in to the next episode. Hopefully, you've been enjoying some of the guests that we've been having. Our most recent podcast is one that I found very intriguing, talking about autism, etc., with Dr. Huber. And if you haven't listened to that one, by all means, stop this one. Go listen to that one and brush up on some of the information regarding autism, number one, but then number two, an approach, how you relate to autism is really what I got out of that conversation with Dr. Huber. So very, very cool. Today, what we're going to be talking about, after we handle a few housekeeping issues, is LPS, chronic inflammation, chronic disease, neurodegeneration, and some of the connections that we're finding in the research. And so all of this stuff is coming out of my day job. And my day job right now is reading laboratory diagnostics for a bunch of different clinics across the country and being able to develop a plan, play call, develop a roadmap, and I very much enjoy it. Very much enjoy it. And so I'll go from anywhere from 30 to 50 cases in a day. And it's interesting to see just the spectrum of people that are being afflicted by the same disease processes. And it's irritating, number one, because if there are, and this is just in my little world here, right? If there are this many people dealing with the same issues over and over and over again, what are we doing from an education perspective? Where do we miss it? That's my question. Where do we miss it? So I suppose you don't care until you have to care, and for most of these people, that's where they're at. But one of the things that I get excited about is new and different information. And you get these doctors, these colleagues of mine, I so much appreciate them. They are rock stars in the industry. They are seriously leading the charge in their communities, and little by little, it's turning the tide. And it's something that I hope they don't take lightly, right? I don't take it lightly. What I look at is being able to spread this functional medicine message across the United States in a way that's intelligent and easy for people to follow. Those two things together, they don't have to be mutually exclusive. And so if we can put both of those things together, that's the goal, obviously. So anyway, if you're listening to this and you are one of those providers, good on you for doing what you do. Next, I was on a couple of different podcasts in the last week here. There was one that I thought was pretty cool, an interesting take on health and wellness. And so the podcast is called Highly Functional. The lady's name is Brianne Showman, and she's a physical therapist. Also is very involved in the CrossFit style of working out. And by very involved, I mean I'm a novice when it comes to CrossFit and that type of stuff. You know, I got the setup at my house, but I mean, this lady's all in. And interesting conversation, and she has interesting questions that we're able to discuss. So if you get a chance, listen to Brianne Showman on the Highly Functional podcast. Take a listen. So, all right. On top of that, been digging in on quite a few different aspects, as I mentioned, with lipopolysaccharides. And the more research that I do, the more interested in this I become. One of the things that I found is that most providers, if they are in a spot where they're dealing with LPS, right, they've spent years and years and years researching them. And I just want to highlight that you don't have to do that, right? Like in functional medicine, when we're talking about harnessing innate intelligence rather than blocking, down regulating, or decreasing function, rather than the provider thinking that they're smarter than the body, that type of thing. In functional medicine, you are working on building proper physiology and function. That's the name of the game. You will build proper function by dampening LPS, and how we dampen LPS is by fixing a lot of the gut issues that we have and eating clean food. And so when we look at LPS, lipopolysaccharides that are basically born of bacteria, whether it be external or internal at this point, anytime we talk about new and different information, I don't want you to get sideswiped by that information. I don't want you to get apprehensive in what you're doing in your own practice. I want you to stop preparing right? Stop getting ready before you take action. Get out there and help somebody. Act already, right? Act. I get emails from people all over the country that listen to the podcast that they talk about, well, I would be in practice if I did this, or I would go start my own practice if I did this. If I had this, if I knew what you knew. Hey, it's not about what you know, it's about what you can find out. And so when you engage with somebody, and if there's a question that you don't know, you say, I don't know, but I'm going to go find out before the end of the day today, and I'll get back to you. Right? That's it. That's it right there. And so stop preparing. Stop trying to get ready and waiting to help somebody. Get out there and help somebody already. Come on. Do it. All right. Let's talk about LPS a little bit. I have a research article that I'm going to include in the show notes here, I believe. And it's called Overnutrition Determines LPS Regulation of Mycotoxin-Induced Neurotoxicity in Neurodegenerative Diseases. And it's out of the International Journal of Molecular Science. And I think this is back in, 2015 it looks like here. One of the things that we look at is basically neurodegeneration. It's the up-and-coming thing. If you've been listening to the podcast, you know that neurodegeneration is on the menu for most American adults as they age. And worldwide, they're looking at millions of cases by the year 2050. And that's a lot, right? That's a lot. So when we look at something that is largely controllable, if we view your health as DNA plus your lifestyle equates to your health outcomes. Well, if you don't like your health outcomes, either change your DNA or change your lifestyle. One of those is going to be easy to change. So if you don't know that part, then let's start there. Okay, so anyway, lifestyle. Creating a lifestyle that is going to be compatible with health and healing, especially when it comes to neurodegeneration. So if you are somebody that is looking at parents that as they age, dealing with neurodegeneration, or if you're looking at patients in your own patient population in your practice, and it's not just about brain fog, it's not just about forgetting where you put your keys or somebody leaving their wallet on your desk as you're treating them, that type of thing. It's more than that. Those are just warning signs. Those are like the road flares to a massive problem that is underlying all of that. And so when we look at LPS, the effects, this is straight out of the literature here, the effects of bacterial lipopolysaccharides on dyslipidemia, so cholesterol problems, and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease indicate that the clearance of metabolism of fungal mycotoxins are linked to high cholesterol and amyloid beta oligomers. What they're basically saying is that LPS slows down your ability to detoxify, number one. Number two, it creates a cholesterol problem. And both of those, lack of detoxification and high cholesterol situation, are going to promote a problem with metabolizing fungal mycotoxins and creating beta amyloid. Now, that's a problem if you know anything about Alzheimer's disease. And so what we want to think about is if the exit strategy is blocked because of lipopolysaccharides and the resulting inflammatory issue that develops with them, maybe we shouldn't be so concerned about lowering cholesterol. Maybe we shouldn't be so concerned about getting rid of the beta amyloid, which has been shown in the medical literature to be a protective mechanism. What I think we should be concerned about, and what this research article is discussing, is making sure that we are promoting proper function in our patients by handling the inflammatory issue as a result of the LPS. So that means get rid of the LPS. One, where does LPS come from? It's going to be produced by the gram-negative bacteria in your gut, right? And those are going to be there normally. The problem is that when we eat the standard American diet, we create a super version of LPS. That super version of LPS starts to develop a leaky gut syndrome for most patients. And most people don't know that they have leaky gut because they've always felt a little weird down there to begin with. And so what happens is this super version of LPS cross the gut barrier, right? And we create an endotoxin reaction. That endotoxin reaction triggers NF-kappa beta systemically, which is going to be a problem. We'll come back to that in a minute. And that systemic inflammation is essentially a cell-mediated inflammatory reaction that once that train starts, there's not a lot of things in nature that are going to calm it down. These patients usually end up on steroids at some point, and those steroids lead to furthering of the leaky gut syndrome, so that when they're off the steroids, what happens? we develop it again, but to the X degree. And so what happens with all of this stuff is just like everything in nature, if you let something that you don't want grow in your body, it doesn't listen to you, right? Unless you get aggressive with it. Well, how do we get aggressive with LPS? Well, number one, we got to stop eating food that has LPS associated with it, right? So if we eat food like apple juice, grains, alcohol, coffee, peanuts, all these things that have lots of mycotoxins and have lots of LPS production associated with them, if we eat that stuff and we expect to feel well in the long run, it becomes a problem. One of the things that you can do is, if you like that, right? If you like, I don't know why I said apple juice, but it does have a high level of mycotoxins associated with it. But if we look at this and we say, I like apple juice, I like alcohol, and I really like coffee, if those things are an event in your lifestyle rather than a process, like if those things are Saturday and Sunday instead of Monday through Sunday, you are far better off. You give an opportunity for your body to heal at least Monday through Friday, right? If you can do that, that would be the way to go. Otherwise, get rid of it. Don't have it. Just avoid it, right? These are the little things, like, what does it say? The little foxes spoil the vine. That's what's happening here. It's the little things that end up spoiling the vine for your patients. So when we look at the opportunity that you have, food and controlling food, having quality food that is not associated with LPS or mycotoxin is going to be very, very important. Now, when we have bacterial-based LPS associated in the gut, we have to be able to control that. One of the ways of doing that is using a binder. And a binder, something as simple as activated charcoal, has been shown in the medical literature to bind lipopolysaccharides. And if we can control those, we're vacuuming them up, we're binding them in the intestines before they're able to cross that barrier system into the bloodstream and become an endotoxin reaction. It gives us a great step toward health and healing for our patients. It's like turning down the intensity level on that endotoxin reaction. If you can assist innate intelligence by just blocking or binding the LPS absorption, that is a huge step in the right direction for most patients. Now, most of these patients also are associating LPS with cognitive decline, as you're seeing in this neurodegenerative disease journal article. Excuse me. What in the world? When we look at this journal article, one of the things that you'll find if you're looking at MRIs in relation to this journal article is that oftentimes the brainstem is going to be downsized. In these neurodegeneration cases, the brainstem will often downsize. When the brainstem downsizes, we are looking at a decrease in transmission, or electrical transmission, through the cranial nerves. One of the cranial nerves that I very much I'm interested in is the vagus nerve and how it innervates the gut, etc. If we have lack of transmission down that vagus nerve and we have lack of gut motility, that gut is more likely to develop into a bacterial imbalance with the LPS situation expressing itself and fungus, yeast, all the stuff that comes along with it, right? Because we're basically farming these things without motility. So your patients that can't go to the bathroom every day, your patients that are going to the bathroom once every other day or every week and having terrible bowel movements, this is a really large area of concern for them. If their brain is not going to allow gut motility, then that means their nutrition and their lifestyle has to allow gut motility. How do we do that? Fibers, that's helpful. We can send some transmission up through those afferent nerves back, so it hits the cortex, comes back down with some messaging, and we have gut motility. That would be fine. Otherwise, these patients use stool softeners. They use stool softeners, and they don't use them every day usually. They use them like when it becomes a massive problem. What do we do with all of this? Well, as I mentioned, activated charcoal or some level of a binder or something like that is going to be super helpful. Additionally, if we end up in a spot where the binders are not helping move the gut, right, the motility is still low, there are things you can do in order to promote proper function there. Everybody loves a prune every now and then, right? And sometimes a prune doesn't work, which means we move to magnesium. Sometimes magnesium doesn't work, which means we actually move to stool softeners. And those stool softeners will provide some level of support until we can get the bowels moving once again. And so the question is how often do we use these things? And the answer to that, from my perspective, is as often as you need to, because ultimately, in order to fix the gut issue, you're going to have to fix that brainstem issue. And so when we provide a dampening of the lipopolysaccharides, when we are changing the dietary recommendations, using the nutrients associated with it, the only thing left to do is to utilize nootropic. That's it. You got to utilize the nootropic, and we got to make sure that that tissue is beginning to regenerate and expand and create better neuroplasticity once again. So when you have handled all of the triggers, and by no means are these all of the triggers that can happen in somebody that has a neurodegenerative disease. I'm not being foolish about that here. So when we look at heavy metals and all these organophosphates and pesticides and stuff, there's a ton of stuff. I understand that. But when I'm talking about LPS specifically, this is something that you can handle, right? This is easy, like physiology 101, handle it with your patient. So one of the things that I get excited about is being able to see the reflection of LPS on a blood chemistry. And so oftentimes you get the cardiologists that have an opinion about HDL. Your HDL is 100. You are never going to have a heart attack. That is wonderful. Well, I'm going to present a different side of that. The question is why is HDL so high? Right? Like, it's nice that the body can do that, but why is it so high? What in the world? And typically in this instance, what you're finding is that LPS, they go systemic, it creates an endotoxin reaction. The body will deploy HDL to go and sequester that LPS. This is found in the medical literature. That LPS then is being inactivated or sequestered by the HDL, and we move that up and out of the body. We handle it. We don't want that to continue to have to happen. So when you see somebody's HDL value at 70, 75, 100, 120, I saw the other day, that does not need to remain. Like, you don't need to be dealing with that in the long run. And yes, once again, it's very nice that the body can do that. We don't want it to have to do that. Unrelated to cardiovascular health is that HDL when it's that high. What it is doing is it is trying to control the systemic inflammation that's associated with LPS. And by doing that, yes, you will calm down the cardiovascular issue, right? By doing that, that's great. But it's more important than that, right? When we look at linking LPS with neurodegenerative diseases and just the onset of what's about to hit the United States from an Alzheimer's and cognitive decline perspective, oh my goodness, it all starts in the gut, right? And this is something that the naturopaths were talking about in the 80s. All your health starts in the gut. And everybody laughed at them. And I'm just, I smile and chuckle at it now because sure enough, it was the people that were making $14 a visit and not charging for anything other than that were right. And here we are with this modern medicine machine trying to develop new and different ways to help reverse neurodegenerative changes. And it's something as simple as your health starts in the gut. Goodness. All right. On top of that, if we look at a LPS from a different perspective, one of the things that I want you to see LPS as is maybe it's not the genesis of chronic disease. Maybe it's not the sole reason for chronic disease in your patient, right? It is the genesis of chronic disease in many people, but maybe it's not the case for your patient. And that's all right. But I do want you to see it for what it is. It is a great magnifier of chronic disease, just like mold spores are. You put somebody that is moderately healthy into a moldy environment, and they will be less moderately healthy. It's almost guaranteed. On top of this, if we look at LPS as the great magnifier of chronic disease, it just shows you what's there, right? It is something that will magnify existing problems. And because it magnifies existing problems, it becomes a target. And that target is something that people in the functional medicine world, in the clinical nutrition world, are the only people that are looking at this stuff right now. It's stunning. Absolutely stunning. When is the last time you ever had a prescription for a binder in the gut, right? Other than cholestyramine, right? And you're only going to get that if you're dealing with massive amounts of like mold and die-off, right? So when are we getting these binders otherwise? We're not. We're just not doing it. They sell them at the grocery store, not at the pharmaceutical counter. And this is why this happens. So there's a less respect for the nutrients that are sold at the grocery store than there are at the pharmaceutical counter. And that needs to change a little bit. And it starts by us developing a little bit more of an animation around it. Get a little intense around it, right? Stop preparing, as I mentioned earlier, and just get after it. And I think that's going to be a huge change. And it is changing. It is changing. So that's cool. One of the things that we want to look at is understanding When we are dealing with lipopolysaccharides that have gone and turned into a systemic endotoxin reaction, how many of our patients are dealing with that? Approximately 50% of United States adults are dealing with a full-blown endotoxin crisis, and they don't know it, right? Endotoxemia, and they have no idea. They think that they just have high cholesterol genetically. They think that they have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease because their genetics are just messing with them. LPS is a trigger for both of these things, and I want to make sure we highlight that here, because ultimately it's you, the lifestyle coaches, that are going to promote proper function with these patients. So, moral of the story today is, if you see high HDL, if you see anybody with a neurodegenerative disease, if you see anybody with NAFLD, chronic type 2 diabetic situation, if you see anybody with autoimmune conditions, for crying out loud, lack of gut motility, constipation, chronic or not, LPS are bound to be a concern with these patients. LPS. Use a binder, manage the food situation, and start promoting proper function. Move them in the right direction as much as you possibly can. They're going to thank you for it down the road, right? Even if they don't understand what you're doing exactly, it's noble cause, I will say that. So, all right. Some quick hits here on LPS. Blessings on the rest of your day. Check out this neurotoxicity and neurodegenerative diseases article that I'm linking in the podcast notes below, and have at it. Keep doing what you're doing, everybody. Saving the world.